I've been really thinking a lot about this call. So thank you for bearing with me. So yeah, I think that it's funny because we always hear people talk about the vibe, like I didn't really get a good vibe from that person, or I like the vibe of that place. And it's just like, I never really thought that there was any real scientific validity to all of that. But it's really interesting to find out that physicists tell us that inside every atom is mostly empty space, and what's left is more like a vibrational frequency. So it's not just, I used to, when I first heard about like raising your vibration, I just thought it was like more of like a mystical type way of seeing things. I didn't know there was like actual vibrational resonance that comes. He wants to show you guys his, there we go. So, and Albert Einstein also said that everything in life is vibration. E plus motion is energy in motion. So when it comes to our goals, whether it be health goals or relationship goals, business, lifestyle, the best way for us to approach these goals is to first start by recognizing where we are on this emotional vibration chart, which I find very interesting. I love looking at this and studying it and trying to be aware of where I'm at on this chart. And I also love that many people in ER Shred have been talking about how after doing the ER Shred protocol, they notice they're vibrating at a higher frequency. And I love when people are talking about it this way, or, they feel like they're floating, they just feel so much lighter. And it's just a really cool thing to recognize how powerful our diet is in contributing to our emotional vibration. So have any of you guys, well, I hope all of you have seen the movie Free Guy. It's like one of my favorite movies. It's so good, you guys. I think it's just one of those newer movies that just came out, I think, around Thanksgiving. And I've already watched this like 3 or 4 times just because there's so many messages within this movie. It's so entertaining and the kids love it. But for me, I'm just like thinking about all the different comparisons and how I can compare it to my life. And I love how in the movie, he puts on the sunglasses and he sees a whole new reality. And to me, I feel like that is what it's like when you are at a specific part of the vibration scale. When you're wearing, I like to picture each emotion as a pair of sunglasses. And, imagine they're just all different colors, like red is anger, orange is optimism, green is envy. And you put on the glasses and you're seeing things from that emotion. So, yeah, and it's really cool because in the movie Free Guy, he puts on these sunglasses and he sees things happening all around him that he couldn't see without the sunglasses. And it's like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is just happening around me and I didn't even see it. I didn't even know until I put the sunglasses on. And so here's an example. Let's say I like to picture the red glasses as anger. And so you begin to see everything with a tint of red. But in other words, you're seeing things that trigger more anger in you. So for example, let's say you wake up one morning and the first thing you do is check your email, only to find out you have received some bad news or just something that just makes you feel really crappy. And your mind goes and retrieves one of your default thoughts that says something like, gosh, this always seems to happen to me. I just have bad luck. It's like, I can't catch a break. Just all these thoughts just start, it's like a default setting that your mind has because it's something that you've practiced over and over and over. Anytime you have received bad news or you got rejected, you kind of play these thoughts, but most often we are not even aware of the thoughts that we go to. And so then you go downstairs, you go to get your breakfast, you open up the refrigerator to grab your incubated shake that you incubated last night, and you go to grab it and it tips over and spills all over everything in the refrigerator, and there's more evidence that you just have bad luck. And then you go to get in your car and you back up, you feel a little bump and you're like, oh shoot, and you go check and you just ran over your son's brand new bike and more evidence that you have bad luck, you can't catch a break, and that's just who you are. And it's just funny how our minds do this, and it's all based on thoughts that we've repeated over and over and over, and it started somewhere in the past and has made us continue this thought. So I love this movie so much. This movie, I'm sure all of you have seen this movie, right, Susan? What? Susan? Well, maybe I'm just assuming because we have kids, so we go and see all the new movies. So, but this movie is has such a great message because, you know, Joy is the happy one and she just wants to do all the fun things, and she's always so optimistic, but then she's got to deal with all the other emotions. There's anger and sadness, fear and disgust, and they're all working in the mind headquarters of this little girl. And it's just funny to watch them interact and try to work together. And it's also important to note that although we don't necessarily like the sadness or the fear or the anger and the disgust, we really do want to feel joyful all the time. But of course, we all also know that that's impossible. And if we were always happy, then we wouldn't really appreciate being happy because we wouldn't have anything to compare it to. So I think that the best way to work with all your emotions is to not deny them, not reject them, not suppress them, and try to collaborate with them. Give them each a voice, let them speak up because they have something important to tell us. And usually it's something that we're unaware of. And I really like this movie made me it makes me visualize like a mindfulness manager up here in our heads. And the manager is there, you know, his job is to manage the mind, and he's standing there inside the head, waiting for the next thought to pop through. And he waits, completely alert and waiting. That's what being totally aware is all about, but that's hard because often we're operating on our default emotional settings. And so being mindful is like being so alert that you're catching every thought that goes through your mind, but many of us are not doing that. And so the mindful manager, he waits completely alert, and just as a catcher does in a baseball game, he's there and he's ready to catch the thoughts one after the other. But he's got to be really quick in deciding if he can allow the thoughts to pass by him or not. And his main job is to catch the ones that may sneak by unnoticed, and the ones that, if sucked into the emotional machine, will cause the body to go in a lower vibration. And the goal is to keep the body vibing high, but at the same time, we don't want to hate on the negative ones like sadness, because we need poor little sadness. I mean, she is important, just as important as fear and anger and disgust. And she has something to tell us if we allow her to speak up. And, you know, it's like dusting off the old story in your subconscious. She's trying to make you aware of that story that you've kind of buried deep down in there, and you don't even realize when and where it started. So when our limiting beliefs and thoughts come through, the mindful manager, he needs to pause the mind machine and find where that belief first came from. So he goes over to the memories section of the mind and he starts swiping through all the memories until he finds the one that shows where that belief came from. And now the goal is to decide if that's something he really thinks is true. Is it serving him, and can he find a better thought or belief? So mastering this is really what true presence is. And like I said, there's so much going on in the subconscious mind, but we're actually operating 20% of 20% is coming from our conscious mind, but we don't realize that the other 80% is coming from our subconscious mind. That can actually be a good thing, but most often it's not, because there's so many of these beliefs and thoughts that are deep down there that we are unaware of, but we're living our life through these subconscious beliefs that we haven't really taken the time to inquire about. That's the hardest part, because sometimes it's really tough to find them. They could be buried deep down inside that we just really don't know what's causing the emotion. And that's why the emotions can be extremely valuable for us if we can feel the emotion and ask ourselves the question, like, where is this coming from? And then it's really fun when you start to see this playing out in your life, in different scenarios. And Sean and I were actually talking about this morning. And, we've all heard that once you shine the light on it, that's when you can start making real improvements. And it really is just like the other night I just had my little lamp on and I was reading, and Lily, our oldest, she's 16, she got a really bad spider bite like a week ago, and we ended up taking her to the ER on Sunday because we just thought, oh, it's going to get better, but it turned into a really bad infection. She couldn't even walk, and the infection was going up to her hips, and we're just like, oh my gosh, this is serious. And so we took her to the ER, and but ever since that happened, I kept feeling like there were spiders everywhere. And I was just like freaking out. I'm like, where are the spiders? Because she got bit on her arm and on her leg. And so I'm like, oh, there's spiders everywhere in our house. So I was sitting last night, just writing in my journal with my little lamp, and I swore I saw a spider like in the corner of my eye. And I shined the light over there and there was nothing. But it just reminded me of how, shining the light on the things, sometimes you think it's worse than it is, or you think something's there and it's not. But when you shine the light on those things, that those deep subconscious beliefs, and you kind of think, well, what am I supposed to do? Like once I see it, but really it's crazy how if you allow it to be seen and you just recognize it, there's not a whole lot you really have to do. Like we feel like we have to like effort our way into changing the thoughts, which we can practice, but I think it's better if we just see it and watch it naturally dissipate. And it's the process and it takes time, but that's really how I'm noticing how it works, because I feel like throughout all of the years Sean and I have been married, we've had multiple conversations trying to understand ourselves, and we really are a sounding board for one another, and we can help each other understand different things. And little by little, we're digging things up and we're talking about them. And then I always get to a point where I'm like, well, how do I change that? How do I change this about me? And I keep on thinking like there's something I have to do, but naturally it just starts to dissipate. And I think it's just a really interesting thing to just begin bringing these things to our attention. I really like this quote: mindfulness gives you time, time gives you choices, choices skillfully made lead to freedom. So as we are, inquiring about these emotions, like where's this coming from? What is the thought and belief that's attached to that? It's like taking a step back and giving yourself time so that you can make choices instead of impulsively reacting with these emotions. We can feel the emotion and try to learn what it's trying to discover what it's trying to tell us. But that's where we can actually feel more like we're making progress and have that kind of freedom that we're all hoping for. We want to raise our vibration. And I like to also imagine that it's like we're going down a river, and it's a lot better. We're in a little canoe and we're flowing down the river. And imagine if you were really set on going straight down the river. You didn't want to like swerve in any way. You're like, no, I'm going straight down that river and I don't care what gets in my way. So imagine how that's going to go for you. You're going to try, using so much strength and effort to go straight down the river. But if we just allow yourself to flow with the way the water's going, then you can actually enjoy the ride instead of like forcing things, right? So when we compare that to like our diet, because I know some of you still are struggling to stick with it the way you would like, we kind of revert back to different things. But ultimately, I think overall, many of you are just seeing how much easier it is to stick with the protocol. But I know that we still have our moments. So when those urges and those cravings come in, mindfulness really helps us to discover what's really going on. And you can ask yourself, am I bored? Am I stressed, depressed, anxious? But also mindfulness makes you aware that giving into the craving doesn't solve for the negative emotion you're feeling. It's only a temporary fix that leaves you feeling worse off than before, because now you've layered it with guilt. So you can start piling on the different emotions layer after layer. But I just really would like to talk with Susan about this now, because I have some questions for you, Susan. I know this is something that you talk about, and I just want to get your opinion on all this and your expertise. So tell me if there's anything you want to add to what I shared.
Well, first off, what I'll tell you is we've had conversations in the past, and I may get emotional because I love your journey and I love your process. And all what you put into this, Crystal, and how you're sharing it with all of us. I think it's great stuff. I guess for me, I've been like working on this stuff for a really long time. You're a very methodical, patient person. I love the way your mind works. I'm not. So for me, over the years, going through some of this and recognizing the emotion and being stuck in it, right? I had a problematic past, a past in addiction. My father died when I was very young. I made some bad choices in my life. So I didn't understand my feelings. So I had to, at one point, of course, deep dive into all of this and the reactive mind, because that's all I was in, up until my 30s is I reacted to whatever was in front of me. There was no mindfulness about it. Today for me, it's a little bit different. And I love that you tied this into energy and the quantum physics. And I think, what was that power? I forget the name of the book, but Deepak Chopra is who brought this all into the forefront. And what you're describing in some ways is like I love what you said about the mindfulness catcher, right? So that's like the silent witness, the observer of what goes on in our head with all this chatter, right? Should I do this, should I do that? And then for some of us, we have bad hardware, right? Our wiring is faulty. So like you were giving the example, something happens and the whole day goes, right? But for me, what I did in my life is I started downloading better software, right? So what we're talking about tonight and what you're doing today is you're laying the framework for that software, like giving people tools and ways of recognizing. One of the most powerful things I ever did was a course that taught me that what we feel is a direct result of what we think. We can't control the thoughts that come in and out, but how we react and perceive them is all powerful, right? And we're talking about the exact same. So I love the way you laid it out, and that's my take. I mean, I took notes on a lot of what you said, and understanding, for me, I had a problematic past. So for me, I spent a lot of time digging digging and excavating and unearthing and therapy and reading and searching and going to all these different spiritual teachers. And I finally got to this point in my life where I said, you know what? Screw why. How do I get out of here? And that's when the mind really started to take off for me and to practice it in my day-to-day life. So yeah, I thought that was a great presentation, baby.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think that one of the biggest questions that many people will have, and I had oftentimes when I remember the book now, it's called Mind versus Force, right? Is that the book?
Power versus Force.
Oh, Power versus Force. Yes.
Yeah.
And really, it feels like it's extremely challenging to be around other people who sometimes we classify as toxic or low vibe or just negative, pessimistic people. And we're just like I always wonder, you hear different opinions about that, like, well, distance yourself from those types of people, but then you also hear, well, you can help lift them by just simply being around them. So it's like, what do you choose? Like, you be around and your high vibe is going to help raise their vibe, or their low vibe is going to bring you down. Like, which is it? And how do you stay high vibe so that you can actually be of benefit to that person who's a low vibe?
You're asking me?
Yeah, tell me.
No, you tell me, girl. My best friend since I'm 12 years old, it's called, it's a joke between us when I bitch about these low flyers, right? But, you have to be, there's a lot of things you can do with that. I remember one of my favorite sayings is, I can allow negativity to flow through me and not become a part of me. And that's one, trying to shift to compassion. And when we get to closing, I have this thing I want to share with you. It's called the 3 Gs. But, giving people grace, trying to understand, sometimes you just got to walk away, and sometimes, pray, like say the Serenity Prayer or something. It's a very difficult situation, but I think the gift in that is allowing it to highlight your triggers, right? Because something's triggering you. I remember my mom when she was much older and she got all caught up in all her ailments, and she was very difficult to talk to. And so what I came up with is, I would get off the phone always upset. And so I just started using the tools that we're talking about tonight, right? Recognizing my emotions, what was going on for me, my triggers. So I decided, well, let me not react. Well, when I didn't react and I just listened and got off the phone, I felt much better. I felt more centered, grounded. When I reacted, so what I realized from that is my reacting made me feel worse than whatever she was doing. And you can apply that to other people. So let's say you're in a toxic work environment, that's very problematic because you spend a lot of time there. And the only thing you can do with that is, like, I allow negativity to flow through me and not become a part of me. Compassion isn't always going to work. And it's just like you said in your presentation, owning your feelings, and you get to have them. And sometimes you can behave badly. And sometimes you can just choose to get angry or be snarky or whatever it is, and own it, and then if you need to apologize later, do it. But sometimes these things we go through, it's our way of finding our voice, right?
Exactly. I love that. Not reacting and getting sucked into the conversation, because when we react, we're getting pulled into it, but it's like, you have to stay there. And the compassion component that you mentioned, because that has been the best solution for me when I think about different times where I feel like I'm in a space with somebody who's low vibe and I'm like in a good space, and then I'm like, and my knee-jerk reaction is to get mad, like, gosh, I'm in a good mood and now you're putting me in a bad mood. I want to blame the other person, like, you put me in a bad mood. But I know now, like, I can't blame anybody else for my emotions. It's always a choice, because I can choose to get sucked into it. I can choose the way I want to look at it, the thoughts and the beliefs that want to see that from, or the lens, the glasses that I want to see that from, because I could put on the compassion sunglasses and be like, okay, what is it like to be that person, you know, and just sit there with compassion and empathy and just try to be there for them, not get sucked into it with them and start fueling their fire as well. Because sometimes, you know, when I think back on different times, you know, especially when I was a teenager, I just not, you know, less emotional maturity at that age, you know. I just remember like I would fuel the flame like with my friends.
Uh-huh.
We start like gossiping and we make it worse. Like we kind
Absolutely.
of fuel each other. But then as you grow up and you realize like, oh wait, I don't want to, that's not helping anybody. So it's like you can be there for a person, let them express what they're experiencing and not shame them, not judge them, and genuinely try to see what they're experiencing and feel what they're feeling, without getting sucked into it, just so that you can just hold space for them. And I think, like you said, you can listen to your mom, but you're not going to engage in the conversation. You're not going to fuel the you know, turn
Fire.
it into an argument or add to whatever story the person's telling you. You're not going to be like, oh yeah, I know, right? Like that, he totally does that. And then you're like adding fuel to their flame, you know?
And that right there is being mindful, right? Being
Yeah.
mindful in the moment, like a mindfulness manager. I like that. It's like, you know, so as you get drawn into things like that, you get to choose what you think about that. And, you know, there is another dynamic that we have to own too, because sometimes you being happy and upbeat and energetic is polarizing. There are people who are mean. They're just mean and they don't like that. So they don't want you to have that.
Yeah.
That's a whole different thing. And that's something else that we would need to recognize. And that one we kind of want to back away from, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where they're deliberately trying to pull you down with them.
It has an energy to it. It has a quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what types of things do you do? Like you said before we got on here, you noticed certain times during this week where you felt you were dipping lower. So like, what are some practices that you utilize that helps you recognize that and then begin raising your vibration?
For me, well, for me with emotions, with my history, it took me a long time to recognize that I was feeling some kind of way. So my behavior in the past used to be acting out. It could be shopping, it could be food. You know, when I used to party, it could have been, well, that was a big one. And destructive behaviors. I don't do that so much anymore. But if, let's say I'm gravitating to something, like let's say I want to eat sugar, you know, it takes me a minute and I have to ask myself, okay, what's really going on here? And to recognize what that is, and then to get myself out of it. You know, sometimes we get into slumps and we just want to stay there, you know, and then it's like, for me, what gets me out of it is movement. I use the Tony Robbins jump. That's a big one for me because it like impacts my nervous system and gets me out of it. Music is a great one. Talking to a friend, working out is another one. Essential oils. Tonight I put on some essential oils. Those raise your vibration in a very real way. Music, getting out in nature, walking barefoot. There's so many ways to shift your energy. And then I want to just bring in when you said about honoring your emotions, because like I said before, sometimes you just want to be feeling sorry for yourself. Sometimes you want to be angry. And okay, so go ahead, have at it. But then there comes a time where enough is enough. And then to use those tools to shift, you know, and get yourself back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so important. Like, you know, recently we had, well, like 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, Sean and I had an experience, which I know you know about, Susan, but for those listening, we, I don't know how to like say this I don't want to offend anybody, but we left our religion and that brought about a lot of, emotions that I was not expecting. And one of the main ones was anger. And I remember thinking at that time, like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. Why am I so angry? Like, I don't want to be angry. Like, I've always tried to push anger away. Anger was always like, no anger, no anger. But what I learned is that we have to allow ourselves to be angry sometimes. It's like a way of processing things. And but just don't stay there, and sometimes we can, turn it into something that becomes this never ending, it's like never ending. We're on this conveyor belt and we're going around in circles, but eventually you have to step off, feel it, allow it to be there, allow it to do what it's meant to do, process, help you process things. Also, like, I really like visualizing, giving each emotion a voice, let it say what it needs to say. Like, what are you angry about? Like talk to yourself in that way, or just call it and call your anger a name, or give it a color, or whatever works for you, and like have a conversation and let it come out, express it in a way that, maybe could be a little more useful, but also don't shame yourself for having all the different emotions, and allow yourself to sit with it and express it. But also you got to step off eventually.
I love that, step off.
Yeah.
What's that from a movie? Step Off.
Yeah.
But, I love that. And a lot of this is, because when we're reactive, in the reactive mind, and we're buffeted around by our emotions and we feel powerless, right? So Lenny talked about the untethered soul. And in that book, they talk about the monkey mind and that chatter that's going on in your head. Well, for me, I call it the murderer. Because usually the murderer, that voice that goes on in there, really doesn't have much good to say. That's an internal thing, right? Like, we have people in the group that have described they're going through that. They wake up, they're tired, they don't want to do their exercise, they don't want to engage. And you have to shut that voice up. That's part of this too. And then honoring your emotions is a way of dissecting your emotional anatomy, your mindfulness anatomy, because it's gonna help you understand your operating systems. And so we talk about, if life is happening for me and not to me, then everything is an opportunity to grow.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why we don't have to be afraid of, being lower on the vibrational scale, because all we have to do is start asking questions, wait, where is this coming from? And even like, I like the idea of, channeling the energy, the more negative or lower vibration energy, channeling that into something meaningful or productive or creative, which I think is possible. You could go be angry and paint a picture,
Absolutely.
And, yeah. So
creativity will raise it. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. It will just naturally raise it. I wrote down some different things too that I like to do. Well, first, I think, when raising our vibration, we first just have to begin by asking all the questions. Try to find that thought or belief deep down in our subconscious. Try to find where that's coming from. And sometimes it's layers deep. Sometimes you get one layer uncovered, and then only to find out you have a much deeper, a deeper issue that you didn't even realize was there. But it's like, you just take those layers off little at a time, and we will always be making progress in our, emotional maturity as we ask ourselves these questions. And I think one of the proactive things, shining the light on it and letting, it be seen, that is the first most effective way that we can begin naturally raising our vibration. We just naturally go up as we recognize where it's coming from. But I think also, some of the proactive things that we can do is start practicing a new narrative, something that a new belief or new thought. And the way we create a new belief is by practicing a new thought over and over and over. That's how we kind of ingrain it into our minds, and it becomes more of a subconscious belief if we continue to practice it. So every time you feel lower, one of these lower vibrational emotions, you can find what that belief is. And oftentimes we'll be surprised that we even are believing that story. Like, it's funny because you'll have different experiences even from childhood, and you realize it spiraled into this much bigger thing. You've made one thing one kid said to you at the age of 7 mean a whole huge story about who you are. And it's funny because once we uncover these things, we're like, oh my gosh, that's funny, because I think that it started from that one little incident. And I think my brain, it naturally decided to make a story out of that, make it mean something about me. And then I've locked it into my subconscious. And then I go about my day and I go about my life. And I'm like, oh, wait, I didn't realize that I had locked in this belief when I was 7 years old. And it's just been sitting there collecting dust, but it's causing me to react in ways that I don't really want to react. And so as we, like that quote that I shared, as we become aware of the emotions, we ask ourselves the questions, that gives us the time. It frees us and allows us to not react. And that way we can think about how we'd like to respond. Like you said with your mom, I'm not going to react, but I know as I'm being mindful, I'm responding the way I know is best for me and for her.
That's a situation. I think what you were talking about is trauma responses, reactive mind stuff that get hardwired in there from childhood and stuff. Those kind of thoughts, I call them murderer thoughts. Where some like you could be in a group of people and everyone gives you a compliment and one person says something off, and then you focus on that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So whatever happened in childhood, it's like it sits back there. A lot of times those things, I think, and I'm not talking about trauma, that's a whole different thing, but those things, once you get them into the light, they blow away like smoke. Like when you look at them dead on, they're just like dissipate, like into dust and go away, because you see it clearly for what it is. And then I think just practicing mindfulness, if you're living a conscious life and being mindful, and life is happening for you, these opportunities are going to show up. So if you have something in your life that's always showing up, then it's time to ask the question, why is this always in my life? What am I doing to pull this in? And that's usually a gift, right?
Yeah. Yes. And, I also like to, tie it in with the law of attraction. When you think about,
absolutely,
when you're trying to attract, abundance in your life, you can't be lower on the scale and expect something to come into your life that's like way up there. You have to first work on yourself to get there. And then you are in that resonance to be able to attract those things you want. So we can't be sitting feeling insecure, jealous, and all those emotions, and desperately working hard trying to attract this abundance, that all the things that we want in our lives. We can't be operating from jealousy. If there's any bit of jealousy or anger or guilt or frustration or pessimism, like you're never going to attract the things that you want if you don't first start with your emotions and figure out, how can I slightly climb up that scale? You don't have to take huge jumps from one end of the spectrum to the other, but there are little steps that you can take to gradually start climbing up that ladder. Were you going to say something?
Well, no, I'm just listening to you. Okay. I do have, because I'm thinking there's so many layers to this, and, shifting your emotional state, it can be behavioral. You choose to be happy. You choose to be happy, jump in the morning, the Tony Robbins thing, the jumping with the trampoline, and, whatever it takes for you. Some people meditate, some people do yoga, and I think this is one of the amazing things that we're seeing in the ER Shred community, and why we're seeing this, where people come in. Me and Heather talk about this a lot, where people come in a certain kind of way, and then you see them pop up, or we're talking about come alive, right? right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I was thinking about it this morning. Can I just go through this little thing I have?
Yes, and then
Yeah.
really quick before you do that, Heather, I was wondering if you could look on in the comments on Facebook and here on Zoom, if you can see if there's any questions, because we can, and then you can read, if you see a question, we can read it after Susan's done talking.
So one thing I just wanted to throw out is, first of all, when you're dealing with people, situations, in situations that are troublesome, what I love for that is the 4 agreements. You know, be impeccable with your word. Where is it here? I have it written.
Don't
Be
take anything
impeccable.
personally.
Exactly. Big. Don't take anything personally. And this is something right there. If you make this a mantra to work on this or go through one agreement a month, you know, just to be mindful about it. Don't make assumptions, because when you're being mindful, you can recognize, I'm telling myself a story. I had someone today, I called one of our patients and I have a relationship with her. We're friendly. How are you? And she was short with me and all of that. So I'm like, so I start right away. Did I do something wrong? Is she mad at the doctor? Did I not do something I was supposed to do? But see, this is what I learned, older, wiser. Picked up my phone and I texted her because we're friends. And I said, are you okay? Well, she's going through something. So, but I could have gone with this whole story, and I would throw it out there. Pay attention, people. We do it every day, and we do it many times a day. You know,
So true.
I'm pretty sure about that. But anyway, so this morning, because this week I've been so busy and I've been kind of low vibing. Finally, I said, I think I told Heather, get your ass back to Orange Theory. So I made a commitment. I'm doing that Sunday, and I'm like, oh, how interesting, because having high energy, being in gratitude, I kind of take it for granted. So this week I had a slump and I had to really key into the steps that I take. But I wanted to tie this into the group and what we're seeing happy. So I just came up with this morning. I call it the 3 G's. So gratitude, giving, and grace. So what we're seeing is gratitude is a choice we make every day. You want to raise your vibration, see your own BS, get out of old mindsets, recognize your emotional health, you know, just shift into gratitude, because from that place, it will attract and dispel just what you need, right? Because it's an energetic force. And I know my friend Bob there can attest to this. But gratitude is a choice we make every day. For some, it's retraining our brains. We have no control over thoughts that come and go, but we do have control of how we choose to feel. So that ties right into emotional health. Our feelings are a direct result of what we think, and what we think is a choice. So I think just paying attention to that over time retrains your perception, retrains your brain. And how do we get to gratitude? Well, we talked about that tonight. There's a million different ways. Gratitude list. You know, if you're going through something stressful or troubles, I love something, it's called a God box, where you write what is troubling you, or a family member or someone you're having issues with, and you just write that and put it in a box and give it to God, or whatever you believe, whatever your higher power is. And in that, the energetic of doing that can sometimes be a very powerful shift. Okay. And then the other thing, the giving. So we're seeing that in the community. And I'll bet, and I would love for you guys, if you're hearing me, to put this in the chat. I will bet that there are many people that wake up, go to bed and wake up thinking about, what can I contribute? What can I contribute to the group today? I know we do it as the board. You go to bed thinking about you guys and wake up in the morning. That's where this came from today, because I was going to share this with all of you tonight. So it's a renewed sense of purpose. It's giving or helping someone in the greatest way to change it's the greatest way to change your vibration. So don't forget yourself in that mix. So we're seeing this in the community every day. People, no financial interest, there is no agenda. And yet we're seeing humans showing up in a very pure and loving way. And that right there, that's another thing I use, Crystal. If I'm having a bad day or I listen to the news, I go in the group. And within 5 minutes, my whole perception changes. And then grace, I was looking at grace and I found the Hindi meaning, and that's a disposition of kindness and compassion. So we talked about that, about dealing with low vibers. And I love that because for me, when I think of the word grace, it's like this, and it makes me calm. Just the word, that's for me. And this is a fabulous tool. And I love Carolyn Mace's words with, if you're not familiar, she's another thought leader, very big on personal responsibility. But her words are, grace hover over me. And you can use whatever higher power resonates with you. But I've used that when I've been going through very painful times, just hover over me. And whatever that means for you. And you can do that in moments of stress or low vibers. This is another tool to pause, breathe, and state that simple sentence, hover over me. It's a way to shift into compassion. It's another powerful tool. Grace, we seek to understand rather than be understood. Paying attention and identifying our own triggers is such an opportunity to grow. And it's the same as everything else in this group, embrace the sun. Okay?
I love that. Thank you. Those are all really good tools, and I think can be really helpful for a lot of people. And I think that one thing I wanted to add to your list is cold showers. I feel like I hate doing them, but it is the quickest way to reset your nervous system. It's like, whoo, you're feeling anxiety, you're stressed, you go get in a cold shower, jump in a cold pool or cold lake, and you won't be feeling anxiety anymore.
Actually, if you look up tools to shift that, cryotherapy is in the mix.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is the cold, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. Heather, did you notice any questions or anything in the chat?
So what I saw in the chat is a lot of love around this because we keep telling people about the mindset. So they are loving the tools that you ladies are providing everybody. And there was a request for a book club. So I'm thinking the idea of the books that were shared tonight, we can start putting that in the mindset resource.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
Cool.
We can accommodate that request. I can help make that happen.
Yes, I love books. That would be fun. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you for sticking with me for that 10 minutes while I tried to figure out this whole thing. But I'm glad I could show you my presentation that I put together, and I'm so grateful for Susan Rothman being here tonight and for everything that you contributed and added to this whole topic. So we will be back again in a month. I'm going to have Heather come on with me next time. We're going to talk about time management and all things organization. Okay, and thank you again, Bob, for giving me one of your time slots to do this. This was fun.
Good night, everybody.
All right, have a good night.
Good night, Crystal. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah. Bye.
Great job, guys.
Thank you.